writing a query letter and then sending it out to agents in the hopes that one of them represents your book is admittedly a really challenging process. But what's often even harder is that part where you're just waiting and waiting to hear back from them. And then when you do see an agent's name pop up in your inbox, it can be both exhilarating and extremely nerve-wracking. So today I'm going to walk you through all of the possible scenarios and the responses that you could potentially get from agents and explain what you should do in each situation. Now, if you are in the process of querying, I recommend checking out my video on how to get a literary agent and figure out what they're looking for in writers. There are some helpful tips there that could help you really set yourself up for success in the querying process. And if you find this type of content helpful and you're interested in book writing and publishing, hit that subscribe button. It would really mean a lot to me so I can keep bringing you this content and growing my channel. All right, so the first agent response that I'm going to walk through is admittedly not the response that you want, but it is also the most common and it is a very, very standard response that you're going to get. So don't feel bad. It is a form rejection. Now, this is going to look something like this. Dear writer, thank you for reaching out and letting me review title, but I'm going to decline at this time. I sincerely appreciate you considering me for this project and wish you all the best with your writing career. What this means is that the agent either pretty quickly determined that your book wasn't a right fit for them, maybe it's not a genre that they're interested in right now, for example, or quite honestly, they might not have had time to write up a more personalized response. So what you should do in this situation is honestly just keep querying. Just brush it off, check that agent off your list and then keep going and keep reaching out to other agents. Just because one rejected you doesn't mean that there's not someone else out there who would love to work with you. Now, the second type of response you can get is what we call a personalized rejection. It looks a lot like the form rejection, but it has some specific feedback. So it would go something like this. Dear writer, thank you for reaching out and letting me review title, but I'm going to decline at this time. Your premise is interesting, but unfortunately I didn't connect with the narrator's voice. I sincerely appreciate you considering me for this project and wish you all the best with your writing career. So what this means is that the agent did really take the time to read through your sample pages and your query thoughtfully and carefully, and they seriously considered your project. Now, it's still a rejection, right? So what should you do in this situation? Consider their feedback. If it resonates with you and makes sense with you, or if you've heard the same type of response from multiple agents, or maybe your beta readers have brought up the same point, that's a situation in which you might actually consider revising according to that feedback. So in this case, the agent didn't respond to the narrator's voice, so maybe you would look at those first 10 pages and see if there's something that could potentially be softened about their voice. Maybe something's just coming off a little bit too harsh or it's a little off-putting for whatever reason, and you can potentially tone that back for future queries and hopefully see some more success if it's a common thing that you're seeing multiple people call out. However, in many cases, it may just be the agent's personal opinion. They didn't like the narrator's voice. That does not mean that someone else isn't going to fall in love with it. So if the comment doesn't resonate with you, it isn't helpful for you, disregard it and just keep going. The third response is a really positive response. It is the manuscript request. So this is what every author wants to hear back from an agent. It is the agent requesting to read the entire book and then consider if they want to offer you representation. This means that the agent was intrigued by your query letter and intrigued by your sample pages and is really excited to see the entire project. So what you do in this situation is really straightforward. You send the manuscript. And if you don't hear back from the agent within maybe 3 or 4 weeks, feel free to send a follow-up. It doesn't necessarily mean they didn't like your book. They often have a lot on their plate to read, and so maybe they just haven't gotten to it yet. So I would recommend just sending a quick follow-up if you haven't heard back in 3 or 4 weeks. At this point too, one tip is that you can let other agents that you're still waiting to hear back from know that someone requested the full manuscript. In some cases, this could potentially bump your query to the top of their submissions inbox, and they might actually take a look at it quicker because they saw that someone else was interested, and now they're going to make sure to read through your query and see if they want to read the full manuscript as well. The next response I want to talk about is what we call a revise and resubmit. This is a possible response that would come after the manuscript request, where the agent says they liked certain aspects of the book, but they feel that it needs more work in certain areas, and they give you that constructive feedback and encourage you to resubmit the project to them if you make those revisions. What should you do in this situation? Similar to what I said before, if the feedback resonates with you, it makes sense to you, you agree with the feedback, or maybe you've heard that same feedback from multiple people, consider revising according to that feedback. This means that the agent was almost close to offering you representation, but they just weren't quite ready to take on the project because they felt like it needed a little bit more work. That's really encouraging, and if you are able to do that work on your side and then send the project to them again, there definitely is a possibility that at that point they would offer you representation. So at this point, you could work with a professional editor to actually take their feedback and integrate it in the manuscript. So if you're looking for a professional editor, I recommend checking out my video on the steps to take to find an editor. However, I also want to say that if the agent's feedback doesn't make sense to you, you don't like it, it doesn't resonate with you, you have no obligation to follow their feedback and do as they say. It's your book at the end of the day. If their feedback doesn't make sense to you, that probably just means that you weren't the right fit to begin with. Don't feel like you have to change your book just because an agent requested you to do so, because you absolutely do not. Now, if you do revise the manuscript and you send it back to that agent who you had a correspondence with, it still isn't a guarantee that they're going to offer you representation, but you are one step closer. Now, the final response is a discussion about representation. So this would come after the manuscript request if the agent really likes what they see and is interested to work with you. This means that they really want to move forward, help you get your book published, and sign you on as a client. So what you're going to do next is have a really honest and open conversation with the literary agent, likely over the phone, and discuss your vision for the book and what you're looking for in a publishing partner. If you are in touch with other agents at this point, you could let them know that someone has extended an offer of representation, because similar to what I was saying about the manuscript request, that could bump you up in their inbox, and then they would likely make a decision quickly. Now, take your time deciding if you do want to work with this agent or not. You might have different options. If you have different options, you definitely want to take the time to talk to each agent and make sure you find that person whose communication style, whose feedback, whose vision for the book really matches your own. Don't feel like you have to go with the first agent that offered you representation if you are in the situation where there are multiple. Don't feel the need to rush at all. This is a big decision, and the agent isn't going to put the pressure on you to make a decision really, really quickly. So think it over, consider all the factors. If it works out, then you can sign with that agent and you'll be on your way to getting traditionally published. So now that we've gone through all of the different responses you might get from a literary agent, I do want to mention that in some cases, you might not hear back from certain agents. And this could mean a couple of things. Maybe your query letter got lost in their submissions inbox because they were just seeing a lot of queries in there that they weren't able to respond to. Or sometimes agents will specifically state on their website they can't necessarily respond to every query and that you should consider it a rejection after a certain period of time. If that's the case and you don't hear back from an agent you're really hoping to, keep your head up and keep going. I mean it when I say this, because I see too many writers give up after sending out that first batch of a dozen queries and then just feeling really disheartened because they didn't hear back or they only got 4 rejections. But if traditional publishing is your dream, you should really keep going. There are hundreds of agents out there, and just because 5 or 10 or 20 rejected you, even 100, that doesn't mean that there's not someone out there who does see the potential and does want to work with you. As I said in the beginning, it can be a challenging process, but try to stay motivated and don't let rejections get you down. Leave me a comment below if you have any questions about what to say to literary agents if you get a certain type of response, or just questions about the querying process in general, and I'd be happy to help you out. If you like my videos, please hit that like button below and also subscribe to my channel so that you will get notified every time I bring you one of my new weekly videos. Thanks so much for watching, and happy writing.